an off-duty firefighter who happened to be driving down along the North Circular Road in Edmonton, North London, happened to see a man engulfed in flames. The man on fire happened to be a previously successful British pop star, whose case would throw light onto the way the Metropolitan Police treated ethnic minorities, and it would hold the force up to renewed allegations of racism and incompetence. This is the tragic story of 30-year-old Michael Menson. Michael Menson, one of 11 children, born on the 19th of July in Moscow in 1966 to a Ghanaian diplomat father called Alfred Menson. And in 1968, Michael and his family settled into the UK. Michael's siblings were accomplished choristers for the English National Opera, often touring the country. Upon leaving school, Michael attended Brent College, where he studied for his A-levels. He then went on to Middlesex Polytechnic to complete a HND in microelectronics. But maybe musical talent ran in the family, because Michael couldn't stay away from it, and so he became a dance music DJ before forming a dance music group with his friends in the 1980s. His friends were Carl Tuffin Brown and Lee Guest. Michael got a recording contract at age 18, and Michael's dance music group was called Double Trouble, who sometimes collaborated with the Rebel MC.
Tune, a winning collaboration. This is Street Tough.
The group appeared on Top of the Pops and toured Europe. And even though by nature he was quiet and shy, Michael absolutely loved fame and all the rewards that came with it. He used the money he made from his music career to start his own recording studio, which he called Noisegate. But success didn't last long for Michael, and by the early 1990s, his life began to fall apart. The group parted ways in 1993, and Michael's mental health began to decline after a nervous breakdown. Michael was hospitalized numerous times, suffering from severe depression after his recording studio business collapsed, and then he lost his home. Michael had struggled and worked hard to keep his business afloat, but recession hit hard and he became bankrupt. Michael was diagnosed with paranoid and catatonic schizophrenia, which was controlled by medication, but sometimes he'd forget to take his medication and had a relapse. Michael moved in with family and then into supported accommodation, and he attended Chase Farm Hospital in North London for his medications. Because of his mental health issues, as well as his naturally reserved and quiet nature, Michael didn't have many friends. In Christmas 1996, Michael celebrated it with his family, where his family described Michael as being upbeat and lively. unknown to the family, it would be the last time they would really see him as they remember him, because a week after Christmas, on the 2nd of January 1997, Michael was hospitalized again. An off-duty firefighter sees a man on the side of the road in Sterling Way and Silver Street engulfed in flames. The firefighter attempts to put out the fire and calls 999. Documents found on the burning man's person identify him as 30-year-old Michael Menson, and when the police arrive, they notice what they described as Michael's odd behaviour. The two officers, Joanne Walsh and DC Jim Dunn, say that he was mumbling and incoherent and not acting according to his injuries in a way that was considered normal. They also said he was in a catatonic state. The police knocked the door of Michael's friend Ezekiel Adewale, also known as TS, that morning, as he was registered as Michael's next of kin, and told him that Michael had set himself on fire. Ezekiel Adewale was confused when the police had told him this, as he'd just seen Michael the week before, and he said that he was fine and that he was in the studio mixing new tracks and phoning around record companies. The police then went to Michael's brother Kwesi's house to also inform him that Michael had set himself on fire, and upon hearing this, Kwesi rounded up the family and they made their way to the hospital to be with Michael. Due to the extent of his injuries, Michael had been transferred to the specialist burns unit at Billary Care Hospital. He had third-degree burns on 30% of his body, and his skin on his neck, back, buttocks and thighs had been destroyed. Police believed that Michael had set fire to himself after finding amongst his documents that were on him some paperwork stating that he had schizophrenia. So based on this, they just assumed that Michael had had a mental health crisis and set himself on fire. Going off of this assumption, the police concluded that it was a non-suspicious incident and decided not to investigate it. But the day after Michael had been taken to hospital, his brother Kwesi and his sister Essie was sat at his hospital bed when Michael explained what had happened to him in clear and exact detail. Michael explained that a group of 4 white boys had set him on fire after taunting him with racial slurs. Upon hearing Michael's story, his brother Kwesi went to Edmonton Police, asking them to set an investigation up into the crime. But the police did not listen and did nothing about this new piece of information that Michael had told out of his own mouth, because they continued to still believe that no crime had been committed, as Michael had done this to himself. Michael's sister Alex went to the police daily, pleading with someone to take a formal statement from Michael, but it was to no avail, as the police stuck to their assumption that Michael had set himself on fire, so therefore no crime had been committed. Instead, the police dismissed Michael's admission that he had not set himself on fire, but that it had been 4 white males, as the muddled thoughts of a traumatized victim with severe mental health issues. Michael's brother Kwesi said no police came to take a statement from Michael or to interview him, but after Kwesi and his family persistently contacted the police, DCI Roger Williams turned up at the hospital once, but did not speak at all to Michael. He only spoke to his brother Kwesi and then left. There was no other police that came before or after. During his first week in hospital, Michael was alert and up in bed, doing crosswords and reading. But on the second week, 10 days after being set alight, Michael developed septicemia, a form of blood poisoning from his injuries, which caused him to have 2 heart attacks. And on the 13th of February 1997, 16 days after being set alight, Michael died. Michael's family campaigned for the investigation to be changed from suicide to murder, and Michael's case was eventually passed on to area investigations teams who began a murder inquiry led by DCI Robin Scott. But the police didn't like the fact that Michael's family had got the case passed on to higher-ups for investigating and told the family to stop complaining or it would jeopardise the case. Frustrated and not getting anywhere, Michael's sister Alex went to the press. The police claimed that they had done door-to-door inquiries to find out if anyone knew anything about what had happened to Michael, but the locals said that nobody from the police had knocked their doors. The police also told Michael's family that they'd conduct an operation where they'd stop cars and pedestrians to try and get new information. But on the night they claimed it was to be conducted, Michael's brother Kwesi went to the location and no such operation was taking place. At the inquest into Michael's death, medical staff and social workers said that Michael was not suicidal the day he was set alight, and pathologist Dr. Ian Hill said that it was unlikely that Michael had set himself on fire due to the nature of where the burns were and the pattern of distribution of the burns being on the back of him rather than the front, as people who set themselves on fire usually pour petrol on themselves from the top, not the back. CID Joanna Walsh, the Edmonton police officer that was first on the scene, admitted that Michael had told her repeatedly that he had been attacked and 4 white men had poured accelerant on him and set him alight. But due to the fact that PC Joanna Walsh had believed him to be mentally ill, she had ignored this and had not written what Michael had told her into her report that day, instead choosing to make assumptions based on his history of mental illness that he'd done this to himself, and this is what she'd written on his report. She had also recorded his injuries as non-life-threatening. Ambulance staff and nurses also reported that Michael had also told them he had been set alight, and they had passed this information on to the police. But going off of the assumption of PC Joanna Walsh and her colleague, DC Jim Dunn, this information was ignored. The coroner concluded that Michael's death had been an unlawful killing and not a suicide. Based on the coroner's findings at the inquest, Michael's death was changed from a suicide to a murder. Police expressed regret over their initial failings, and an inquiry was launched into the police on their investigation. The inquiry into the police's conduct was undertaken by Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire, Ben Gunn, and overseen by the Police Complaints Authority, who agreed that the first investigated officer's statement, assuming that Michael had set himself on fire based on the bias of mental health, had skewered the entire investigation, and 4 officers that had been involved in this initial investigation, including an inspector detective as well as a detective chief inspector, had either retired or was on the point of retiring, so they were immune from disciplinary action. But a 4th officer had been advised rather than disciplined, as well as instructed on how to deal with mental health. It was also revealed that during the inquest into Michael's death, letters written by the police to the solicitors indicate police saying that they don't believe Michael's death was anything other than a suicide and no crime had occurred, despite police fire experts at the time describing the event as suspicious. It was also revealed that at the inquest, one of the police officers said to the pathologist, "I don't know why they're worried. This only concerns a black schizophrenic." Police Deputy Assistant Commissioner John Townsend wrote to Michael's family, acknowledging the police failed to take a statement from Michael, failed to corner off the crime scene for 12 hours, lost vital evidence and witnesses, ignored hospital staff when they told police what Michael had told them about the incident and incorrectly recorded Michael's burns as non-life-threatening. However, no apology was given for all this in the letter. Upset by everything that had gone on, Michael's family submitted a formal complaint about the way the police investigation was handled and conducted, as well as the conduct of the investigating officers, to the Police Complaints Authority. Because of the Macpherson report that had come out in 1999 stating that the police were institutionally racist due to the past handling of the Stephen Lawrence case that had happened 3 years before Michael Menson was set on fire, a meeting was arranged by the solicitor for the family of Michael Menson to meet with the Home Secretary, Jack Straw. Following this, 2 years after Michael Menson's death, his case was reopened, this time as a murder investigation called Operation Chichester, and investigated by the Racial and Violent Crimes Task Force at Scotland Yard. An appeal was launched for witnesses, as the government was now trying to avoid a repeat of the Stephen Lawrence case. 200 statements taken at the first botched investigation were never properly assessed or even entered into the Holmes police system correctly because of the initial suicide assumption. And so after combing through all the initial statements, there were 3 names that kept on coming up, with the main name being Constantino, known as Harry. Harry was an unemployed 26-year-old who lived in Edmonton and hung around in a group consisting of 25-year-old student Mario Pereira from Oakfield Gardens, Edmonton, Osgay Savat, a 22-year-old from Edmonton, and a 50-year-old unemployed Hussein Abdullah, also from Edmonton. Because they all had a bad reputation and a history of bad behaviour in the area, Harry was the only one in the group to have his own home, a flat in Harrington Place, which was the group's meeting spot. Harry was also known as Harry the Terminator and was very violent. The group was notorious in the area and hung out at the local petrol station. Police decided to conduct a surveillance operation on the group and used the intrusive invasion technique by planting a microphone into the wall of the flat next door to pick up conversations in Harry's flat. It was the first time that police had used this technique before. But the group did not talk about the murder at all, so the police decided to use a trigger technique to get the group talking about the crime. They would serve handwritten letters to all of the suspects asking for their assistance. These letters were hand-delivered by officers and required a signature. It was then decided to only send one letter to only one of the group members to cause confusion amongst the group. Hussein Abdullah, who took no part in the crime but spent a lot of time with the group at Harry's flat, as he loved and revelled in the notoriety of being associated with the gang, something he bragged about a lot, was sent the letter. The plan worked, and the camera caught the group on tape bragging about Michael being burnt like a chicken. It also caught the men discussing what to say if they were ever caught. The police decided that they would need more evidence to make the case more solid, so they upped their surveillance a notch, with hidden cameras planted in Harry's flat. But Harry found one of the cameras and destroyed it with a screwdriver, then phoned his friends to say that his flat had been bugged. Due to the surveillance operation being jeopardised by Harry finding one of the hidden cameras, the police had to act fast and arrested Harry, Pereira and Abdullah and took them all to Edmonton Police Station. Harry admitted to taking part in the attack, but despite the incriminating evidence of the hidden audio being played to him, he denied murder and perverting the course of justice. Osgay Savat was not arrested because a few days after the murder, he went on the run and fled abroad to Cyprus. The UK did not have an extradition treaty with Cyprus, but due to goodwill, the Cypriot authorities agreed to help the UK police anyway. Once the attackers were arrested and charged, Associates that were initially too scared to come forward gave police information which helped to build a solid case, and the story of what happened that fateful night emerged. One of the workers in Michael's supported living flat had reminded him to go to the hospital for his injection. Michael left home at Southgate at approximately 10 p.m. on Monday the 27th of January. Michael had gotten onto the wrong bus, and when he realised his mistake, he had got off the bus. So that was how he came to be in Edmonton. Earlier in the day, Mario Pereira's girlfriend had told him that a black man had winked at her, which had enraged him. So he rounded up his friends and went looking for a black man to attack. They spotted Michael getting off the bus at Sweet Briar Walk and decided to follow him. And after racially abusing him, Mario Pereira then poured WD-40 onto Michael's coat, and Osgay Savat lit it, whilst Harry Constantinou stole Michael's Walkman. But the attempt to set Michael alight with the WD-40 did not work, so they went to go and find another accelerant. They then returned to find Michael further along down the road. Michael was then doused in white spirit and set alight. Harry was the group's lookout. Michael ran into a nearby phone box and tried to lean into the phone box to douse the flames out. But the flames were so hot, it partially melted the Perspex phone box doors. But it did not put out the flames. Michael then proceeded to run down Silver Street, leaving a trail of burnt flesh and clothes behind him. He ran onto a grass verge, desperately trying to rip off the little remaining clothes he had left. And that's when the off-duty firemen had spotted him. By the time emergency crew had arrived, all Michael had left on his body were his socks. Despite being horrifically injured, Michael had repeatedly told ambulance staff what had happened. He also told the police when they arrived what had happened, and even described one of the attackers, but the police ignored him. The first to be tried was Osgay Savat in September 1999 in Cyprus. Michael's siblings flew out to attend the trial, and on the 28th of November 1999, Osgay Savat was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 14 years in prison. Harry Constantinou and Mario Pereira's trial was next in November 1999 at Enfield Magistrates, and during the trial, the secret recordings were played where Mario Pereira was heard saying and excusing on the tape what had happened by saying, "So what? He was black." And all of the group were referring to Michael as the burnt geezer. Mario Pereira was also caught on tape voicing his concerns about whether he could be forensically linked to the crime. Mario Pereira also claimed that the attack had all just been a joke which went wrong, to which prosecutor Nigel Sweeney replied, "An appallingly unfunny one, you may think." Almost 3 years after the murder, Mario Pereira, who was stood in the dock with his hands in his pocket and no sign of remorse, was convicted on all charges of murder and perverting the course of justice, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Charalambos Constantinou, aka Harry, was cleared of murder, but jailed for manslaughter and for perverting the course of justice. He received 12 years. Hossein Abdullah was convicted of perverting the course of justice and was given 21 months. The judge praised Michael's relatives for their determination and tenacity. The Police Complaints Authority had confiscated all the documents of the police's handling of the case to launch an investigation. And 6 years after the murder, in 2003, the inquiry was complete and details released that confirmed evidence of negligence and racism. The inquiry concluded that the initial investigation was unprofessional, uncoordinated, negligent, and at best inept. Even more shocking, it was revealed that instead of investigating Michael Menson's case, the police had instructed a special branch to investigate Michael Menson's family. But despite the findings of the report, no charges were brought against the officers, as it was said that the issues weren't grave enough to warrant a trial for the police officers involved. No punishment or reprimand was ever given out to any of the senior officers, and only 2 junior officers were issued a warning. How the case was handled showed disturbing parallels to the Stephen Lawrence case. In February 1999, 2 years after Michael's brutal murder, British pop star Annie Lennox got the crowd to stand up at one of her shows to show respect for the families of Michael Menson and Stephen Lawrence.